to the Interstice podcast, episode 28. I think I got that right now. I keep saying that and it's not been the right thing. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that we had a changing of the guard once again because I've forgotten my laptop at school. There is a future wherein exists a setup that I repeatedly use with ease and very little downtime between how things are organized. We are not yet there, which can actually segue nicely into what it was I was going to talk about. But first, of course, if you want to get your questions answered on the podcast, please do write me at davetrippin@gmail.com. We got through a lot last time. We'll get through a lot today, although through my phone because the laptop is gone. Please do, if you enjoy the podcast, hit that like, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon, because a channel like mine, where the aim is quality, not quantity, every one of you who actually really does care about the content makes a huge difference here, and I appreciate that. All right, preambles out of the way. Let's talk about it and kind of how it relates to what I was saying to begin with, that there's still work to be done. So I've been reading, and I've almost reached the grand conclusion, although it's sad. I know how it ends. I've been reading Caesar, and Caesar's biography specifically. And you're taking a lot of things from that. I've mentioned it now through several podcasts. And before you run away, because history bores you, I can make this directly relatable. It's really, really practical information. So one thing that really, really struck me at the end of Caesar's career, or drawing to the end of Caesar's career, we're almost there, was how kind of deflated the guy was. And you'd think that this guy has essentially conquered all the known world. He's achieved every single accolade, then some, and yet there is this hollowness that hounds him. And why ever could that be? Well, I think it's simple, and you see this come up discussed by people who have any understanding of what it is that we enjoy in life, and that's to have some new plateau to summit if we are this kind of adventuring spirit, if we're this sort of person who's really looking to achieve something great in our lives. That means we need something great to achieve. And in the absence of our ability to pursue that, we are really ground down by that fact. And so it's this idea that your enemies and your obstacles are really, really important to you. And it's something that I think is really, really good to remind yourself of as you struggle, because this can so often be the antidote to long periods of time where you aren't succeeding. You can be grateful for the fact that you have something even to succeed in. Some of this is like said tongue-in-cheek, and you might wonder, like, why does he care, or is this a random topic? Not whatsoever. I feel a deep personal connection to this concept because of how long I've had the channel running for. And in the interest of talking to you directly and feeling like there's no facade of persona, that I do totally struggle with the degree to reach and success that I've had. But I definitely have found, as the years have gone on, I found myself more grounded than less, which is good. And so much of it is rooted in this comprehending this idea and feeling not like the things that are set against you are anything other than what is a part of could make you great. And it's really, really useful. So I think you definitely, Caesar's kind of a funny example in this context, because he literally, I mean, he's taken to an extreme, and maybe that's why it's so useful, because he shows when there's absolutely nothing left to do, whereas kind of the beauty of the situation for myself, well, a new plateau for me could simply be getting a new viewer number that I haven't gotten, and there's still arguably, I would say, a near infinite number of accomplishments that I could still reach or gain back on the stormy seas of creativity yet for me in the coming years that I will continue to do this. And I thought it would be something for you listening to reflect on, where I think especially important the point I made earlier, this idea that the thing that might feel like it's grounding you down is actually giving you something to shoot for. And I would connect that to a number of things. Like I talk about it in relation to my channel, but you could set this focus on so many different parts of your life. And it's actually kind of irrelevant which it is, because the principle remains the same. So I could think about this in the context of learning Japanese, and that it's so irritating that I've taken the test 3 times for N3 and I failed, but then to eventually pass it means, like, wasn't that a great obstacle to, so long as you persevered, eventually overcome? I've had this kind of, call it like short-term, long-term goal of, I would love to reach, and I know that it's no end. I know people with 50,000 subscribers. That's what I was going to say, is my goal is to reach 50,000 subscribers. I know that this is no end all, even slightly. Perhaps if you have an incredibly dedicated community that really cares, that is enough for you to do this full time. But for the most part, it's simply to have something to shoot for. All of these things that seem to frustrate our action are actually giving us purpose. And I think purpose, that's me echoing an opinion that I've had on here before, is fundamentally the most important thing to us. There's some bias, because I've identified that in myself, that purpose in my life is the thing that I derive satisfaction from. And perhaps if I'm looking around, there are others who are not so driven by that. Maybe driven's even the wrong word. The people who are not so satisfied by that, because driven almost sounds like a negative relationship with it, where it's very positive. In fact, this is something that you get an incredible amount of satisfaction from accomplishing things, from having accomplished something that was your purpose. So, as I say, I think then purpose is primarily important, as far as I can see. And purpose is given to us by having things that have put themselves in our way. You don't get purpose without that. Purpose, I think, is inevitably bound up in some sort of challenge. I don't know that many. Again, this is kind of an interesting, because it draws out like the essential, the archetypical, the definitive description of what then is purpose. And I would say it's definitely there with something that challenges you. Like a parent might say that my children are my whole life, and I would think then that your children are your purpose. And when we look at it in that context, children are not an easy thing. Children are one of the most challenging, especially in their earliest years, when they're blobacious and they don't talk and they only consume. And then they never allow you to sleep. That purpose is draining you. It's incredibly, it's an incredible tax on your soul to raise these kids, and everything else. If your purpose is your work, well, work is inherently difficult to do. So all purpose is connected to a challenge, and all challenges set themselves in your way in some way. And so, be grateful for your enemies, be grateful for your obstructions, and be grateful for not having yet reached that plateau, because the great horror may be that beyond that plateau there was nothing, and you see that it is the act of reaching there. I've beaten that to death. I think that idea is beat to death historically, but worth discussion. This is another theme that I have, is that all wisdom, all things that we learn through life bear repeating, because it is the nature of our psyche to forget everything. So where some people are bored by they call things platitudes, I think that actually a necessary part of being a decent person, about evolving yourself, about being useful in your community, is a lot of that requires vigilance, and vigilance requires reminders. And so when you come across a phrase that maybe feels worn out or tired or a little bit dusty, I think there's great value in brushing it off, so long as you've not done so frequently that it really does feel tired. But I've noticed that in months, years past, and not in the not so distant past, the number of times that I've had to repeat things to myself. In fact, maybe that's where this conclusion comes from, is I really did realize how many of the things that I'm constantly having to relearn, that I thought I knew that rule. I thought, perhaps rule is the wrong description. I thought I'd learned that lesson. I thought I'd overcome that vice, whatever it may be. This touches a little bit on a video I've made not so long ago that was talking about how I'd had this really stressful experiences that I was going through at work, and how I'd thought all of this experience that I'd gathered in my life was enough. And now finally, when faced with these really, really stressful situations, that it'd be no problem, but it was, and I'd failed to handle the spike in stress that I had, just 0 out of 10, with no grace, with no fortitude, with no stoicism did I go through it. But it made me realize that that's perhaps because, well, first of all, it's tough in the moment. A lot of the things that we think, well, I'm ready, I'm going to reach this moment and I'm ready for it. You don't know. I mean, that's the whole point of how challenging these stressful moments in our lives are, is that for the fact that you've trained for them does not mean necessarily that you will succeed in the same way that an athlete might train for a sports match, but when faced with that really difficult opponent, still is not able to overcome them. So that's going to be challenging as well. But also that there's things that I had learned and forgotten that likely would be useful at that time that I was having to deal with the dragon, so to speak. And so I'm more comfortable with that nowadays, the idea that you repeat things to yourself. I think you'll actually see this too. You'd see some truth in what I have to say here, in the way that oftentimes where you experience something really, really negative, negative experiences, one thing that they're very useful for, of course, is the reflection, which can come afterwards if you take that initiative. Some people go through negative experiences and they don't do shit. They have something that's really, really bad that happens to them. And the way that I'd put this is better numbness than the pain. They would rather not deal with the fact that they went through that thing and not integrate it into themselves. They just as soon forget that it ever happened. But what this means is that you have repressed experiences that you are non-integrated and that will become a neuroses or some sort of expression later in yourself, but one that you haven't dealt with, which is far, 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 far worse. So if you are willing to reflect after these experiences, which is far, far better for you, then what you're usually finding is, after some years, I would say, if you've taken the time to do so in a useful way in the past, is that you're probably going to realize the things that you're improving on, or that you realize you could have fixed, was something you maybe already knew, but you had to learn that lesson again. And I suppose it's just like anything that we practice, where we learn and we learn and we learn until we don't have to learn that lesson again. It's like if I were to play my guitar and there was a mistake that you make, and although we're talking on a different scale of time, but that you repeat that error, like you can't play this note, you always play it too hard, you always play it too soft. And in that way, when we're having an experience in life, when we are confronted by something like that, we play it too hard, we play it too soft. But there comes a time, because you focused on improving the action, that eventually, when faced by it, you actually play it well. And it resolves beautifully, and you let the note ring out. It's great. To make a musical reference to that. So, yeah, there's a lot of this learned lessons, usefulness in the challenges that we have, specifically that we have not reached the heights of what it is that we want to accomplish, being okay with that, using it more as fuel for the fire. It can get so tiring. I think there's a big therapeutic movement. Again, that's not the right word, but there's a big element of kind of cathartic, self-forgiving, that is to allow whatever occurs in difficult situations to not feel alien or how would you say this, abnormal, and kind of accept whatever it is, the emotion that you feel. Not to say that you have to act on it, but that you accept the thing that is happening, and at least your base level reaction, like that you were enraged. There's nothing wrong with you feeling enraged. It's more usually that it's the action that you take when you are enraged that becomes a problem for you. So like accepting that kind of thing. And so I don't think when you go through these experiences, because this isn't at all an antidote for how frustrating it is, that it's this kind of like paradox, right? That this thing is what you derive satisfaction from because you've set yourself against it and you're going to improve and overcome this thing, which is also giving you purpose. But where I've talked at the beginning about how useful that purpose is for you, it's probably, well, what is far louder is that in our minds is that purpose, that thing that's given a lot of purpose to us, is really, really frustrating. and perhaps almost definitely that's why it requires such an important assessment of how it can have a positive placement, because far more the overriding, far more the dominant feeling when we have to go through these kinds of things are a negative one. It's a negative feeling because when you can't play that note, it's so frustrating. When you can't succeed in your creative goals, it's so frustrating. So it's never to ignore that. And it's, I'd say the other part of your medicine, what you're stirring up here together, is that you allow yourself that frustration as well. You're not supposed to become inhuman. I had someone recently say to me when I was talking to them about, I like the idea, insofar as I've understood it, of Stoicism. That's cool. But they said, oh, but it's so unfeeling. And I said, no, in fact, from what I've understood, it's not the absence of feeling. It's actually to feel everything more completely than others may who repress things, but it's what you do with them. So you can allow yourself both sides of this coin. And it allows you to continue in a way that I think, if you've set a goal to do something, will best allow you to accomplish it regardless of whatever happens. I mean, this idea as well, it's so useful. You want to talk about like repeated themes, but one of the repeated themes, and it's so, so true, is this idea that you will so frequently fail in the thing that you were trying to accomplish. I mean, especially given the scale of it, right? Like, wow, you didn't know how much you could fail until you try and accomplish something great. Like, some people go straight to the top, but it is a truly humbling experience to eventually get there when you're going for the big stuff. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's writing a book. Maybe it's getting the entrance into a company that's like highly sought after. Perhaps it's someone with similar creative goals to myself. But when you take that on, unless you're like, you got like the Midas touch or whatever, you better do some kind of thinking like I'm talking about, because otherwise you will be swamped by failure. It'll drown you. And I really do appreciate more and more, I think, for people where people look at like overnight success stories, or people who are reaching success, and how easy it is from an outside perspective to take for granted that person finally making it and saying that they did it overnight. But I've always felt like it's such a disservice. It's such a dishonor to the people who have put in that time that you don't necessarily see. And for my own gratefulness, it's very, very useful, because I'm always so curious now when I see somebody do something great. It always begs the question, like, what was the time put into that? When you start to acknowledge this, when you start to feel it yourself, if you are trying to do something any greater, I think it allows you to see so much more in others. It's actually a way to connect, because when say, oh, let's take like somebody more ambitious, not more ambitious, somebody who's done more in terms of cinematic accomplishment than me, a lot more. Like this guy who directed that Shazam movie, he was from YouTube, and it did so well. And I feel like so many people would just say, "Oh, he's an overnight success," and he's now directing like one of the 5 successful DC movies or whatever. But they're not seeing how it is that he got there, because I don't feel like that's a mistake. And it's probably like if you went into like his education and then you went into his personal life, and there's just such an incredible story behind our successes. There's so much more than the final piece of art that you see. And I think that that's amazing, that the story need not end with that initial experience that you have of some artist's accomplishment. Like I just recently, without turning this into a movie podcast, I got out of Tenet recently, and it's a masterpiece. It's absolutely a masterpiece. And it's so interesting for me to think of how well it seems to represent Christopher Nolan in a purity of vision. And then when I see that kind of purity of vision, I feel like that is such a clear expression of, it's like distilling down this person's experience in life into one creative piece. And so when I look at that movie, I see a movie and there's all that's to be dug into there and enjoyed. But even more curious to me is the things that preceded the movie that arrived at its creation, and that is his whole personality and all these other movies that led up to it, and all the, if you went down into the quantum detail of each individual moment that led to him being able to create that, is so cool. And I think if you're going to really enjoy art, that's something that you want to have access to and to appreciate, because it's just like nerding out on analytics. If you love this thing, then you're probably going to enjoy the analytics of it, because it's just a bunch of like an endless glut of information that better represents the final product, better articulates, better tells the story of that whole thing, that thing that you're seeing as a final product. Like I really do believe that. Like I think that that's something I really feel like if I make a video, it's always funny to me how much time and like personal detail goes into every video, and it gives me another respect for like when I see people make videos that I'm like, wow, what was the story behind like gathering that footage? What were the failures and successes? And I say that as a point of, that's easy for me because it's personal, and that's something that I know well, since it's something that I do. But if you do more experiences, you can just as much feel that. For example, it would be like someone who draws or paints, when they look at an image and they would understand, wow, they employed this technique. That technique takes 20 years to learn, and details like this that deepen your impression of whatever it is that was presented to you. So lots of creatively minded thoughts. As I sat down today, I took a moment to think, do I have anything to say? And usually I have too much to say. So it was true. Whether or not that's something that I hope people can connect with here today, I am always curious exactly how it does. So that was one thought. The other thing that I've been really enjoying to consider, and also try and get into my life, is proper use of the epigenome. And I like how it has this feeling, obviously, at once very scientific. The epigenome is the genetic expression of your genetic code. There's your genetic code, but then your epigenome is like the circuitry on top that's dictating what parts are used. You're like, what? Really? Is that true? Is that? Yeah, that's how it works. There's like, you got your genetic code, but then your epigenome is this other, it's basically the programming. It's like, how are you then going to program? And what is your gene expression? And what I was learning was that depending on almost every single behavior that you carry out, you are altering your epigenome. So with every action, you are altering your genetic expression. And in some way, I would say kind of fundamentally steering your fate. What could be more at the origin of your actions than your genetics? What could be more deeper rooted in your subconscious than your genetic expression? And the thing that most I've got access to would be my the working out that I do. And I discovered that when you work out, there's just incredible changes that are made to your genetic expression. And I really do believe that it went beyond when I work out, that it's this, oh, it makes you feel good. I knew that there was all sorts of like chemical reactions occurring. Everybody knows that, like dopamine, all these, not oxytocin. that's the love drug. But it's, I'm not remembering dopamine's obviously one of them, but it's the neurotransmitters released, and it's right there in my head. Maybe I'll remember in the second half of this, that are released, endorphins, there it is, that are released when you work out. But what I've discovered is that it goes far beyond these endorphins that are released. It goes deep down into your genetic expression. And I think I'm postulating here, but I'm quite certain that this is also why you see major influences in your children if you are active, because it's that genetic code. You're not just sending them a guaranteed genetic code. The code that you will send them is dependent on your genetic expression at that time. So if you are expressing yourself, I love it because of the parallels creatively. If you're expressing yourself, but you're genetically expressing yourself, if you've sent them this really fit, eating well, sleeping well, real nice copy of code that you send to your offspring, they're going to do well. Whereas if you're binging on donuts, you're getting horrible sleep, you're drinking every single day, they're going to get that janky code, and that's why your kids suck. It's not their fault. It really isn't their fault. But I've been really enjoying that, because I feel like when you can make more of a personal connection with the actions that you take in a day, let alone more of a personal accountability, that's really, really useful and can be fuel on the fire to make you want to do more that is good in a day. And so learning about this, this was in Lifespan, written by David Sinclair. I talked about this a couple podcasts back, but I never spoke about this specifically. It was fantastic, and it's something I recommend that book to people. And although I know you won't read it, you're not going to read it, are you? It's fantastic, and if only to pass along that little morsel of information that your behaviors throughout the day are affecting your epigenome, which is your genetic expression, which is the most fundamental, impactful thing that you could do for how you're going to carry on through to the next day of your life. These dominoes of cause and effect, or effect and cause, maybe they're the same. All right, so that's the first half of our show here. I'm going to load up the comments on my phone because I don't have the laptop, as I said at the beginning. So let's get into those. Man of the future. I'm using a smartwatch, and so I'm going to use the timer on there, and I'm going to go to my phone here to get into these questions. So we're catching back up. This is into September. I killed the August questions, getting my life back in line. Let's see. So, hey Dave, this comes from Hamza. Have you watched this? I have some questions. I'm planning on getting certificates coming to the country. All right, what's the first question? Is it possible to land a teaching job in Japan in those smaller companies without a degree? I've never seen this question before in my life. Do you happen to have a list of these small companies you have mentioned in the video? Berlitz, Altia, Neon, Heart Japan. There you go. You got a list. How did you worked on your visa after changing? They sponsored my visa as I changed. I hope that that's useful for you, my friend. Those companies that I listed, get on there, watch my teaching playlist, and you'll find more in-depth answers to that question. Okay. Next one. Okay, this says, oh no, this one says, I want this to be private. Okay. Okay. Hey, Dave, I'm enjoying the channel. Right on. Let's do the questions. Good. We got right into it. Although you didn't say where you're from, and that breaks my heart, my friend. I love to know where the people are from. Okay. One, not ALT related, but I'm curious. Do you ever meet fans who happen to be in Japan? Yeah, sure. Absolutely, I do. It wouldn't be hard for me to do. Channel my size. Don't let anybody with a channel my size pretend like they're unreachable. I work probably one of the most insane day jobs in the world, and there's still time to do what I do and to interact with you guys. Of course, you want to be respectful of everyone's time, my time as well as yours, but there's room for it, believe me. What do you think is better? Jobs that pay hourly, daily, or monthly? I've been seeing a lot of different jobs that pay differently, and I wasn't sure what ultimately was the better deal, since I'm unsure about how holidays work. Okay, this is a cool question. Why is this a cool question? Well, it's a good question too. Okay, so why it's important and why it matters and is because it really, really is dependent on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. So I think most typically people are going to say the knee-jerk reaction is to say that, oh, it would be naturally better to be on a salaried position because that is probably going to come in a better situation, is going to come subsidy on your healthcare as well as your pension. You're going to have, like, no matter what amount you work, you're going to make sure that you get that steady income, which is good because you don't want to have to mess around with other things. But then the truth of it is that it is good for all those reasons, but that can lead to a rigidity in your lifestyle. And say, for example, you are someone who has some other aspiration, who might that be? Then if you have that kind of other aspiration, then these highly restrictive jobs, due to how predictable they are, can in fact work against you. So doing something like the hourly kind of stuff, yeah, it's not as reliable, but if you are able to organize your time and say get a couple good ones, say for example you find something that's paying you 5,000 yen an hour, what is that? Like what do you work in a day then? You do, let's see, you do 4 hours, you got yourself 20,000 yen in a day. 20,000 yen in a day for 4 hours of work is pretty good. I'm not saying that you're like, you're not Scarface, you're not going home with the mansion or whatever, but if you're doing that and you're then piggybacking on that basic salary of like this limited amount that I've described, and are then given time to do these other things that might generate an income for you, like passive income through stock footage or photography or ad revenue or photo prints or yada, 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 then doing something that pays an hourly wage where you spend way less time at your day job can be super, super beneficial. Now, I'm talking about that in terms of aspiring to more, but also what if you're just the kind of person who wants to, on a dime, go and visit somewhere in Japan? Not in the current climate so much these days, a lot of jet set travelers going around, but what if you're that kind of person? Well, then also doing this hourly thing can be really, really beneficial. Now, that's why I'm saying it really depends on who is asking this question, because then what about the guy who's got 2 kids, he wants to settle down, have a house? I think it's clear as day in their situation what they would do, and that is they would have the more predictable salary. So the thing that I'd really like people to take away from that, though, is where people generally frown upon the hourly and just see part-time gigs as, it's not so good. 1, they can pay a lot of money. 2, you can get a lot of freedom from them. And let's go on to even 3. If you organize them really well, you could actually probably make way more doing them, but they require that effort to organize. you'll go here, you'll do this, and you'll do that, that you could even make more money doing them. And I think they're actually really, really underappreciated. Number 3, back to the holidays. I've seen show that you have 3 to 6 weeks. I'm assuming that's related to school. I've seen jobs that say you get 10 paid holidays. Okay, so like time off. You asking about time off? Yeah, you get pretty predictable time off. In public schools, you're going to get some time at Christmas. You're going to get some time in summer. It's probably around 14 days. And if you're in the public school, you get all national holidays off. If you're in a private school, you may work Saturdays, in which case, if there is a God, if there is that great spaghetti monster in the Sky Daddy, I heard that recently. That's a great description, Sky Daddy. Then what they'll do is they'll often pad your summer and winter with even more holidays because you had to work those Saturdays that other people are not. So they can be fine. Are you able to negotiate your salary for the first job? I think they'd laugh at you. Just like with an ALT company, with a dispatch company, their business model works on the fact that they don't even care about the people who've come there staying for more than a year. So do you think they're going to negotiate with a person who they're like, you're going to be gone in 12 months? I would say no, you're not going to negotiate with them because there's another dancing monkey that's lining up behind you to get the job just as well. Like, I think having our eyes wide open is important, and they're useful in the way that I've described a million times. But if you're thinking about salary negotiations, like what job are you even talking about at this level? Like, this is not a salary negotiation job. This is a get a working visa and get into the country and get something better, and consider with these better jobs doing a salary negotiation, but not for a dispatch company. Ha 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 ha. That's funny. I think that was the joke question here. I won't be graduating until the summer of next year. Well, I still have a chance in getting a job, even though I probably won't physically have my degree until August. Yeah, well, again, this is all right, sweet summer child. Wow, there's how many questions? 27. I don't know if we get through all of these. But I'll do a few more because, I mean, they're interesting. Let's see. Going back to question 7 or whatever the hell we're on. Do you think working is it okay? I won't be graduating until summer, blah, blah, blah. These companies don't care. I get the sense, and you're totally welcome to this. Like, that's why I'm realizing I'm overly critical, because clearly you're at a stage where you're figuring everything out. So of course you're asking questions. As well you should, because it's asking questions that you get hopefully good answers that allows you to make informed decisions. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing. There's something wrong with knowing and still doing something stupid. So don't worry, even if I'm taking the piss a little bit and bugging you here. They really wouldn't care. They're so desperate to get people over, and their whole model is turnover. And so for them, just as long as they know, they're like, okay, you're going to have your degree. All right, we'll work through this. Perhaps they have to hold off, but they'll keep you in the piggy bank until they can use you. Let's do one more here. We'll just go through. I'll see if I can find a cool one. No, should you avoid high school jobs? Should those who aren't super keen on grammar rules avoid middle school or high school jobs? I think this is fun. So if you were at more of a private school situation, you may find that intimidating, because you might end up in a situation like I am, and I'm not saying this is not me flexing, but where they give you actually are sponsored for a license, and then you end up teaching classes, and it really matters that you know your shit, because you're in there alone, and the kids do a review of you, and if they're like, this teacher has no idea what he's doing, you're going to get fired. And there's also the expectation at that point, while you probably wouldn't find yourself here, that you will have teaching experience and have figured these things out by this point, you would hope, and also probably have a TESOL certification, things like that. Anyways, but I'm just saying there are situations that exist like you're afraid of, but actually this is the twist. We're going to do M. Night Shyamalan on you here. For the most part, actually the easier jobs in the public school system are the high school and junior high school jobs, because you're basically seen totally as a helper in the public school. And because the grammar is more challenging at the junior high and high school level, the Japanese teachers who are teaching are expected to know far more and to be far more capable. So what is actually quite ironic is that you are the most intense teacher that you're going to be and have the greatest expectations made of you in the lowest grades in the public school system, because the grammar is they're not expecting the Japanese teachers to know it because it's really low grammar. But what that then means is that the teachers in elementary school know nothing. They really don't. I can say with confidence, not an ego thing, love the Japanese people to death. I'd write a speech for it, the wonderful endless depth of kindness I find here. But I can say, as a matter of objective fact, after spending many years in elementary school, that the vast majority of teachers there are less confident than the children that you will teach. And so that is why you end up leading things. And it's always this great, ridiculous kind of Ingsoc 1984 2 + 2 = 5, where they call the foreign teacher in elementary schools the T2 and the Japanese teacher the T1, when it's complete and utter bullshit. That foreign teacher is leading the whole class. They are designing the lessons. They're doing everything. There's a great responsibility put on them there. So in answer to your question, short form, I wouldn't worry so much about if you got into the higher school grades, you would actually be doing less because more can be done by the Japanese teachers themselves. Okay, this is kind of cool. This is interesting. So it's, hi Dave, watching your stuff, really like it. I got a query. What could be the best possible way for an Indian to get a teaching job in Japan? I've been mailing, asking about recruitment of Indian nationals, but not much luck. What would be your suggestion as a non-native English speaker? Thanking you in anticipation. Well, I would say that it's to focus on, if you're a non-native speaker, because you do, I believe, need to be, well, there's a caveat, I will say, that if you are a non-native speaker, there is a loophole in that if you have taught in that language for, I think it's 11 years, then you're okay. If you have been educated in that language, you are also okay. So you could be a non-native speaker of English, but you were raised in an English-speaking institution for 11 years, and then you still qualify like a native speaker of English would. So these are other ways through. Now, that is a requirement that is put on the public school that you're looking at right there. That's a public school problem you got. But in private schools and in the Eikaiwa sector, this is not an issue. It's not a problem. Not a problem for you. And so what you can do is you could apply to the private sector and find yourself a position. And once you get in, you're accumulating experience, you're in the country, you have access to all these other jobs that you're seeing, whether they be hourly rate or whatever else. And you can be whipping yourself up a nice amount of money to be going to the movies, buying yourself all the things that you enjoy, living a life for sure. So there are ways in, and I do like answering that question. I mean, that non-native speaker and please, sir, can I teach without a degree? These are my wheelhouse questions. But the non-native one is one I really want to. I always got time for that because I want to be inclusive. I want equal opportunity, but not equal outcome, because I know we're all different. We'll handle it differently. All right, cool. So let's continue. All right. This comes from Roger. I've been watching it for almost a year. My son has recently. This is cool. I like it when I get questions from parents, which is kind of trippy. Thus the name of the channel. My son has recently graduated from the University of North Texas. Congratulations to your son. International Business and Economics. That's pretty good. Minor in Japanese. Well done, getting that education. Yeah, I spent last summer in Japan. He's having a great life, this guy. And fell in love with the country. Well done. He applied and was recently accepted by Interact North Company. I believe they did that division so they could be smaller companies and circumvent the new Shoken Hoken rules that were going to make them have to pay for their employees. Interact's not going to be caught with that kind of nonsense. With a placement with their company for a position starting in March 2021. Interact North Company is made up of Sendai, a whole bunch of places. Any tips or advice on what to look out for or be prepared for would be a great importance to me and his mother. Yeah, for sure. Encouraged him to look for a direct teaching job when he arrives in Japan, and not wait, as you'd advise, to look for better offers. So I'd say for the most part there, Roger, you've caught the fox in the hen house already to not get caught sleeping and to look for other things. The only other, if I had some, and I think this can be like applied to so many situations, it's to, without becoming paranoid when you work for one of these companies, to know your worth and to not, and by that what I mean to say is that it's okay to not take things that the company says to you at face value. I've said that. I've said prior to that, don't become paranoid, because you don't want to become the guy thinking like they're always out trying to get me. You don't want to become that guy, because then you can't enjoy your life. But say, for example, you were moving into a new apartment and they said, oh, well, there's some damage in this apartment. You can't move into this apartment until you pay for it to be fixed. Yeah, that would raise, this seems like that subreddit of suspiciously specific details. That happened to my friend working for Interact. He was working for Peppy Kids company or whatever. I was like, hey, you get a little bit better hours if you work with these guys. He said, oh, okay, cool. I got him in. And then before they let him move into his apartment, they tried to pull that bullshit. And I phoned up my manager and I said, that's extortion. When in the history of man, I'm sure it's happened, but this is hyperbolic for effect. When has it ever been that you pay for the previous tenant's damages? And the guy kind of mumbled on the phone and was like, yeah, I suppose that's true. So you never know when these companies might kind of pull some bizarre shit, and raising your hands and saying, whoa, hold on now. Is this reasonable? You mind if I double check? And to give a little pushback is definitely worth it, because I've seen enough situations like that. Mine was also when I was driving, they pushed through this change for the rental vehicles that basically adapted the way in which you were recompensated, or the bill was split with the company, that it was totally a reshuffling that outwardly looked like it was doing nothing, but actually was making the renter, the employee, take on more of the burden of renting the vehicle. And I pointed this out and said, you're a bunch of shiesty pirates. And they were like, oh, you're the only one who mentioned it. That doesn't make it okay. That's not cool. So yeah, that would be my thought, because there's no one specific thing. And to be completely honest, to maybe put your mind at ease a little bit, I mean, for them, the boat not to rock is the best thing in the world. They want their contracts to be renewed, and they want whoever's employed by them not to do something shiesty at the schools. Maybe that's one more thing that I could say. It seems like a given, but it's easy to forget sometimes when you get more comfortable at the schools, to be very, very careful with social media. There's like, I was at an event, this is like years and years and years ago now, and kind of spoke. I was quite happy to have a good relationship with the school, that it never became more. But I was at one of their sports festivals, and I was like at a distance from the event, and I recorded this event, and I tell you, you couldn't make out a person in it. And to my mind, I was like, oh, this is just this sweet cultural thing. I'll put it on my YouTube channel. And because I didn't associate it like would seem obviously bad to me, like you taking a picture with your students in the hallway and then you put that on your social media, because I felt that no one was visible. I thought that it was okay, but absolutely, absolutely not. It's just like, it's an easy rule. And in retrospect, I was like, yeah, that's true. You could just never take any sort of footage as a teacher, any sort of picture as a teacher from your school, and ever have that on social media. Maybe that seems self-evident, but I don't know, because this is it is a symptom of the generation just below me, that it's so totally, utterly, and in some ways a good way, normalized to social media everything. And so you wouldn't think of it as malicious or as an invasive act for your kid to do something like that. But then if they did, if the school likes them like mine did, they came up, they were like, Dave, and they knew I had the channel and they were really chill. They were like, did you put like a video of this sports festival there? And I was like, yeah, I thought it was really cool. They were like, it is very cool, but could you not do that? And so I was like, oh, well, thank you. Thank you for telling me, as opposed to making it any bigger a thing than that. So I was quite lucky. And I took it down. And as I say in retrospect, I was like, yeah, that would be important. I mean, and the kids don't know this either, right? They're just like, they're very much like the generation of like younger teachers that might teach them. I've got this class right now, and it's been so funny to me. I don't think they'll make it this far through a podcast. If you do, hi guys. They're international students, and so they lived internationally. They're fluent in English. And they were so coy about whether or not I knew that they knew I had a channel. It was dead obvious to me in all their behavior that they had discovered I did. And it was adorable. I was like, oh, it's fine. And it's one of the reasons I'm conscientious about what it is that I put on my channel, because so long as I'm working for these schools, I'm aware that some of the kids might come across it, let alone kids who are fluent in English, and that changes things a whole bunch. And I noticed that they had found me on Instagram. I don't think one of them messaged me, but when we came up in class, and I was straightforward with them and said, yeah, I've got the channel and I do it this way, and these are my values as I do it. One of them posed the question of like, oh, could I message you on Instagram? And unequivocally, no, no, you can't. And to you and I, perhaps that is self-evident, but the kids, it's so normalized to them, it's just communication. Why would that be a bad thing? And you're not a bad person. I know that you're a teacher that I trust. So why can't I speak to you? It's the context. The children, in fact, we actually cover this, although I was trying to explain in the class that context can be used to infer meaning from language, but that it also has this double layer of inferring meaning from contextual situations as well. It's the context that matters in this case so much, and how wrong that is, because it's, they are a student, and a student has a sacred bond with their teacher that is a kind of mentor peer, and social media, what would I say? How would I describe it? Social media communication through it is not a mentor-peer relationship. It's a peer relationship. And not only, peer is best, but I was going to say also generally peers, to clarify the point, peers is especially specific to your age group. And so that you would be speaking to someone who is so much younger than you. I know you understand this as I say that, but I was trying to put it into the context for them that they could understand why speaking to your teachers would not be permissible, and you shouldn't do it. But it raises the point. The overall point that I'm trying to make here is that they might not necessarily know, and that's why you need to be on top of this, and that's why it's important to not get caught in a daze, or not get caught being sharp with details as they relate to privacy and the kids that you are teaching. So those are my thoughts. That's cool. Like I say, I get one maybe like once a year from a parent, and I'm always like, well, that's cool if I'm getting through to the parents as well, parents of the kids. That's great. So thanks very much for your email, Roger. I hope that's my kind of musings there might be something that you can take away and find useful. Thanks so much to everybody for tuning in to this episode. I feel like, 50 will be a big one, right? So I've got a number to go through yet. And I'm actually considering, because I want to be more ambitious with a number of these I put out, I'm thinking of upgrading my Libsyn account, because right now it's set at 200 megabytes per month, which that's 450 megabyte episodes, but I've also noticed like when I try and have a little bit nicer sound quality that chews through a bunch more, which might then limit me to 3. So we'll see about that change in the not too distant future. But thanks very much for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, if you could drop a like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, that's awesome. Please do consider supporting me on Patreon. It means the world to me. It's how we grow this institution of trippin'. I will catch you guys in the next video. The clock has run out.